Yeah, but contagion just indicates to the method of
I guess I'm
spread,
just saying that you're charging your
right?
language as if it's negative.
Well, I do think it's negative personally, but
Being
that's not even why I'm
trans is
using the word
negative?
necessarily. I think it's spreading is, especially to kids.
What? I'm saying
Why?
being trans for me, as far as I'm concerned, is
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about people who have a specific identity that doesn't actually hurt you or anyone for that matter. America's Almanac, you are being requested to speak. Come on up. How are you doing today?
Hey, good. How are you?
Yeah, doing great. What did you want to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to dive right in if I can. I know you guys are talking about scripture and stuff, but
No, sure.
I
Go
wanted
for it.
to kind of change gears if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, are you of the opinion that being transgender is an immutable or innate characteristic, and that someone is trans from birth?
Some of it is social, some of it is not.
How do you make the determination when someone is telling you? Is it just you take their word for it, or is there some other standard that you can?
I don't think we have like an accurate way to like measure 100%. Like, okay, this is social, or like it can even be a combination of both. So I don't think that there's I don't think that there's like a super empirical way to do it. But there are some telltale signs, some things that like can be shown that are usually traits vindicative of being trans.
You mean to decide that someone, or to determine that someone was trans from birth as opposed to a social contagion?
Yeah.
Do you know what some of those would be?
Yeah, there's like specific portions of the brain that are shaped differently. There's also like neuronal links that are, let's say, for example, if you are born male, that you actually exhibit something in between where it's like the female trait of the brain versus the male trait of the brain, where it's like you're something in between, which would be a further indicator.
Okay, so what if somebody exhibited those characteristics? If somebody, let's say, was a male but had this female brain that you're talking about, or at least characteristics of a female brain, right? Or had this sort of situation where it didn't perfectly line up with a male brain, whatever it is, but did not identify as trans. They identified perfectly as male only. Would you affirm that, or would you tell them that they are trans?
No, I would affirm them.
So it really isn't biological, then it's only about self-ID, right?
No.
But so there isn't. Well, what you're saying here is
those
that there
types
aren't
of
actually
traits
biological markers.
can
It's all self-ID.
lead to that, right? But it's not a guarantee, but it can lead to that.
Okay, but but that's the point. Even if somebody exhibited those characteristics, but didn't identify themselves as trans, then that would indicate that those
that's kind of
aren't
the point of
indicators
gender
someone being
identity,
trans.
though, isn't it?
Yeah, but that would indicate that it's not biological in basis.
No.
That it's self-ID only.
No.
All right. I don't really understand this position though. If you're saying that, well, it's part biologically based, and you're admitting some is social contagion, okay, but we could put that aside for a second. Even if you take somebody who, let's say, they exhibit these signs of, and even let's say it has outward expression, right? Let's say that somebody has a brain that, a female brain in a male's body or whatever it is, and they even present themselves. They dress in women's clothing, and they even have a woman's name. Even if they do all of that, but they tell you, "I'm not trans. I'm a cis male." You would still agree with them that they're cis, right? You would never tell them that they're trans.
Correct.
Right.
Because you're talking about a person's gender identity.
Right, and so it doesn't actually matter in your worldview anything biological or anything empirical whatsoever. It's self-ID only.
No.
Right. That doesn't make any sense. Like how? But if
I'm saying
if
it
somebody
can.
exhibit
It doesn't
all,
always have to lead to that. Sometimes it can be social, sometimes it's not. And that's okay. Right? Again, you're talking about someone's gender identity. So all you have to work off of at that point would be effectively their phenomenology, but there are biological factors that tend to influence that.
even if you take out the biological aspect now and we focus on the social contagion, that would all reduce to self-ID. There's no other components to that, right?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? You were saying that there is a social contagion.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't call it like. Did I call it earlier contagion?
Well, I
don't think I called it a contagion. I think
you did say there's a social aspect.
Yes,
to it, right?
social aspect, right? So okay, I don't call it a contagion because that kind of like
I would argue contagion, right?
Well, that implies that there's like a sickness almost. But I don't believe it's a sickness. I believe that there's just a social aspect, right? Like if somebody is like, "Hey, wearing red is cool," and people start wearing red, I wouldn't call that a contagion. It's just a social aspect.
Yeah, but contagion just indicates to the method of.
I guess
spread,
I'm just saying that you're charging your
right?
language as if it's negative.
Well, I do think it's negative personally, but
Being
that's not
trans
why I'm
is
using the word
negative
necessarily. I think it's spreading is, especially to kids.
What? I'm saying like
Why?
Like being trans for me, as far as I'm concerned, is you're talking about people who have a specific identity that doesn't actually hurt you or anyone for that matter.
Well, we can actually dispute that. I would argue it does hurt.
Okay, how does it hurt people?
Who come. Well, from my worldview as a Christian, you're asking me to lie, and to lie would be to hurt me, right?
So you're saying that you're being forced to lie?
Well, let's actually.
You realize gender is different from sex, right? And so you wouldn't be lying.
Hang on, I'm going to prove it to you, right?
And just FYI, I want to let you know, you are lying to me right now.
No, I'm not. But
you are. The reason why you are lying to me right now is because ultimately it doesn't have anything to do with lying. What it has to, because I can sit here and I can explain to you the difference between gender and sex. However, that's going to go in one ear and out the other, because ultimately what it's about is that trans people make you uncomfortable. Because let's be honest, in the Bible, it doesn't actually say dick about trans people. Okay. So right now, you are lying to me.
No, I'm not lying.
Yes, you are. You are lying to me.
I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. I want to prove
No. Let's go down the rabbit hole. You're lying right now.
I'm not lying to you. This would harm me because from my worldview...
No, because you're lying right now. It's not harming you at all to lie.
Listen, listen to me. Even if I accepted that it were true that there's such a difference as in gender and sex, that they're different. Even if I accepted that it were true, but from my worldview, I didn't believe it, then from my perspective, it would be a lie regardless, right? Even if it were false.
What?
Right? So listen, from my worldview, you're asking me to lie. You're saying
are gender and sex the same thing?
Is true. I would argue they are. I would argue gender is totally meaningless, actually, as a word. I think it usually reduces to just personality. Gender was invented by John Money. It's totally fake and irrelevant.
Wow, that freaking old Matt Walsh argument. That's brutal, dude.
Have you refuted it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're talking about like a series of different studies from different fields of study, from endocrinology to psychology to the neurobiology to the neurochemistry to the biology. Each one of these are able to establish their own understanding of sex being different from gender. And they all came to the same exact conclusion. So in order for your position to be true, you basically have to ignore five, or I think I named six, I think it was 5 different fields of science.
I can ignore it on the basis of it all reduces to self-ID anyway.
Can you?
So
okay, how about this? Can you at least steel man the point of the difference between sex and gender?
Yes. So from
Go
your
for it.
position, it would be that sex would regard to your chromosomes, your biological makeup, your male or female. And gender is your identity, how you identify. You can identify as a man, as a woman, as non-binary, or anything you want, basically.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's correct.
so
So
what?
you already understand sex is different from gender.
I didn't agree. I just steelman your position.
All right. If I told you, like, you are behaving like a man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you say that to a woman?
You can if she's.
So what is that?
Yeah, if she's behaving
How does
like a
that
man.
work? No, but hold on.
that
What
would
does
be
that
it.
mean to behave like a man? I guess I'm confused as to how that exactly works, right? Because how exactly can you say that a woman is behaving like a man?
Well, if she's doing something that would typically be associated with what men do.
Oh,
Like I don't
so
even understand.
so what you're
the
saying
point
is that there can be a difference between, say, the roles, behaviors, and identities versus their sex.
Yeah, but she's still a woman.
So
even
sex
if she's
is
behaving
different
like a
from
man.
gender. So sex is different from gender.
Yeah, but it's actually the distinction that proves the rule. Like the fact that
What?
you have
No,
to say
I've
that she's
brought
behaving
up
like a
how this
man
is even
proves that
possible, right? And even by your metrics, I can walk you straight to it. So you already know sex is different from gender. So when I say
No, listen.
something like trans women are women, obviously I'm not referring to the sex. I am referring to the gender. And so under that basis, right? Under that basis, no, you are not lying. You just want to hate trans people. However, the part where you are lying is where you say you're bothered by the idea of lying.
No, listen. What you just did is you pigeonholed the definition of gender into what you just said. Where you
even
explained a
yourself
personality
walked
trait.
yourself to
Listen,
it,
hang on,
right?
I'm gonna
I didn't
explain.
make it
I'm
up.
gonna explain.
And
Listen,
it's
I'm
not
gonna explain.
invented by John Money either.
Listen, I can explain. You just described a personality trait. That there are girls who are tomboys, for example, right? They like to play with trucks instead of dolls, whatever.
Yeah.
That doesn't make them boys. That makes them girls who sometimes act like boys or like things that boys like. It doesn't make them boys. It doesn't actually prove your point that gender is different. All it does is prove that there's a spectrum of personality.
So then saying something like that you're behaving like a woman right now, if I told you you're behaving like a woman, that actually, right, cannot possibly make sense in your mind because gender is the same as sex.
I don't know. Of course that can still make sense.
Okay, so then that means that you're able to establish a difference between sex and gender. And the next thing I want to point out to you, just so you know, John Money did not invent it. No. In fact, some of the earliest people that actually examined gender roles was Margaret Mead in the 1930s. That predates. So, and then not only that, John Money's work is largely criticized even by people who are in the gender community. So I know you want to like demonize the position because let's be honest, you just hate trans people. What I'm asking
I don't
you,
hate them as people. I hate their ideology.
okay, yeah, that's literally their identity.
Yeah,
do you understand? Like they can't just make this
wait.
problem go away on their own, right? You're literally, imagine, for example, that I showed you a person who has like Down syndrome or something and that you hate them because they have Down syndrome. Like this is completely ridiculous. I hate them because of their
totally
Down syndrome identity. No, it kind of isn't. There are certain biological factors that absolutely lean somebody into becoming trans. And I can list them for you. I can give you instances of biological factors that result in someone feeling the way that they do. That's why we've exhibited trans people for thousands of years. There's been different cultures where this tends to come about. And you're able to establish that roles, behaviors, and identities can be different from your sex at birth, which would mean that they are trans.
You got to let me refute you, bro.
Oh, my God,
You already admitted, though, that there's a social aspect, and none of the biological indicators have to be present for you to affirm them. So why even bring it up? Who cares?
Oh,
If someone
because
self-IDs with none of the
that
biological
happens
facts, you will affirm
sometimes,
them.
but that's not a guarantee, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You understand that yes,
that
you can
means it's
deal
besides
with
the
more
point, then.
complicated aspects instead of this rigid black and white view that you seem to apply. For whatever reason, you are stuck on the idea that endocrinology is somehow going to be A or B, white or black, red or blue. You really don't actually have that possibility. Endocrinology is complicated. Somebody
My point
having
is you don't even have to get
congenital
into the
adrenal
endocrinology because it's
hyperplasia
social.
is not going to fit in your basic binary of sex. It's just not.
None of that matters. None of that
Yeah,
matters
that
because it's
does.
social to you.
Oh my God,
It doesn't
dude.
matter.
I said sometimes. Sometimes
Yeah,
it does matter.
But if it's sometimes at all,
I need you
then
to
that means that it
help
doesn't
me
need to
with
be biological.
with your argument, because this isn't going anywhere. Right? This is not
Listen.
convincing even slightly.
Listen, I'll explain.
Mhm.
I'll explain.
Yep.
If you're conceding that yes, sometimes there may be, and I'll just concede for the sake of argument, sometimes there may be biological indicators, but you're saying they don't have to be for someone to be just equally as valid as a trans person, then what you're actually telling me is that it's all irrelevant to the argument, because anyone with no biological indicators whatsoever would be just as valid. The biological argument is totally irrelevant.
So-
It's not necessary.
So some of the things to point out regarding this is that it's no skin off my bones if somebody is just going through their own sexual journey, right? If it's no skin off my bones to affirm them, right? Especially under the basis that I can see that there is an increased level of suicidal ideation by being rejected by society and other people. So I'm perfectly okay with, even if somebody is entirely social or whatever, a majority of the time, these people, they end up growing out of it, right? It's no skin off
That's
my
just
bones to
emotional hostage
affirm
taking.
someone's, no. It's simply being a good person, right? At that point, right? You don't.
That's the same thing, bro.
What?
You're saying,
No, I mean,
look, you're saying
because
you have to
you're
believe in
applying
my
a
delusion or
negative,
else we'll kill
you're
ourselves.
applying a negative attribute to it, and I'm telling you that it's like you can be a decent person, right? You don't have to believe in any of this stuff, but you could still be a
but it's all
decent person.
perspective-based. For
Like, I'm
me,
just
decency
curious,
is
like, do
telling
you
you
ever
the truth.
you ever looked at like a trans person and then you're just like, you're not really a woman? Like, what the fuck? What are you doing? What kind of
what I'm
fucking
saying is-
internet-bound troglodyte do you have to be where you got to like get up and just be
listen.
hateful to trans people?
I'm saying that you're assuming your position is the decent one. What I'm
Yeah, it
saying
is.
is it's decent to tell people the truth. And
No,
not to lie to them.
no, because
not to
you're the
affirm
one
their-
lying.
No,
You
haven't
no,
proven
you
that.
are. You are lying. You are lying. The
haven't
reason
proven
why I
that.
know you're lying is because I've already proven it. I've proven
No, you
exactly
haven't.
that. You lied.
proven that there's such
You
thing as personality.
lied
Good job.
because this has nothing to do with lying, and you and I both know, because we're not fucking sub 100 IQ, know what your inner motivations are. Right? You actually don't give a crap about lying. And I promise you, I have you ever messaged anything on this Discord?
Yeah, I was on here last week. I talked to you.
No, I mean like messaged. Like
Oh, probably not. I don't know.
So wouldn't it be a shame if you were found lying about something?
I suppose. Is there something you're accusing me of lying? Did you tell?
Well, yeah,
to my
I already
face?
did. I did. I told you to your face.
Yeah, but you haven't.
I don't
proven that.
believe. Well, I just did. So the way that I determine that you are lying, right, is because that you yourself know that that trans people make you uncomfortable. You don't like the idea of men calling themselves
did I say
women.
that?
You think it's perverted, and you think it's gross. That's what I think you think.
I didn't say any of that.
And so
you
here's the
just said
thing: you
that's what I
sitting
think
there
you
telling me that you do not want to lie. You hiding how you actually feel and instead saying, I don't want to lie, is an example of you lying.
Bro, you are. This is literally avoiding the entire argument. You're
Not at
assuming
all.
my motivation. You're tackling that instead of what I actually said.
Okay.
You don't know
Yeah,
anything
no,
about
I
my
actually
motivation.
did tackle it. I tackled exactly what you said. Sex is different from gender. When I am referring to a trans woman, I am referring to their gender. Okay?
If
And
you
so, and you
have not
yourself can
proven-
even acknowledge
listen,
the difference between sex and gender.
no, I can acknowledge that there is sex, and I can acknowledge that sex is essentially the word you refer to as gender is equivalent to sex in my mind. Okay, and from my worldview, they're the same thing. So for that reason, that's why I reject the concept of gender entirely. It's a social construct, right? It's totally irrelevant. It's equivalent to sex. Man means adult human male. Woman means adult human female. There can be men who act in a womanly way. There can be women who act in a manly way. That does not make them actually men or women. And you have not proven that it does. All you've proven is that
the way that I've proven it to you,
personality.
the way that, so there's people that could behave. Gender. Well, what does it mean to behave woman-like or man-like?
It would just mean exhibiting. So, for example, things that would come naturally to men. Like for example, men are physically stronger than women. So if a woman was out here like throwing tires and shit, right, then you would say that she was acting manly because she's stronger than the average woman. That would be a reasonable thing to say. That doesn't mean she's a man, bro.
No, but that would be an aspect, right, of a social role that's typical, and strength is that's typically associated with their biology. So it may not be the best example, but that is typically that is typically a role or a behavior that is typical of that of men. And like, I could venture to say that there are absolutely women that are stronger than you or I, right? Like, we're not in the top tier of strength when it comes to men. So it's fair to say that there's probably a woman that's top tier in strength that would definitely beat the crap out of us, correct?
Are you actually disputing that men are generally stronger than women?
No.
Well, then why bring up the exception to the rule?
I'm giving you an example of a role that's typical of that of male, but it doesn't always map on.
Right.
Okay. So
I don't understand the point.
There's
like,
roles,
this doesn't prove that there's gender.
There's behaviors, there's identities, as well as expectations in society that associate with you being male or female or non-binary, right?
Well, I wouldn't even argue non-binary at all.
All right, male or female. Like, I don't need to bog it down with this. So you're aware that there are there are societal expectations, there's roles, there's behaviors and identities that are typical for that of males and females. Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So, and then there's also social constructions, right, that are largely influenced by norms, right? Like, take for example, women tend to drink fruity alcoholic drinks as opposed to less fruity alcoholic drinks. Like, I know, like a Cosmopolitan, that's typically a female drink, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Those are social constructs. So these collection of things, that's gender, right? It is and it's often stemming from someone's sex, right?
It would, I mean, if that's what you are considering gender, then I could agree with that definition. You haven't actually explained how it's distinct from sex, though.
Okay.
Or why it's even necessary as a category, because it's still just personality.
Sex is typical with biology, and it's typically assigned at birth. Usually how it's done is the doctor
it's not assigned, it just
looks
is, right?
at the genitals and goes, okay, male, female. That's what they do. That's how they determine your sex.
So it's not assigned, it just is, right?
Well, no, it is assigned, because there's instances where it can be so ambiguous, it can actually be quite difficult to actually determine what it is. Like, people are saying, well, what do you mean by usually? Yeah. Like, take, for example, there can be, for example, someone that is growing up with sexually ambiguous genitalia, and it's really hard for a doctor to determine. So one good example is you have a person who has a vagina, they have a uterus, they have ovaries. However, for whatever reason, the labia has fused together to make a ball sack. And honestly, when they look at this, they see just a fused together genitals that's basically non-functional, right? And so what happens is that the doctor, they go and take the baby to an x-ray, and then they find out it has a full uterus, full vagina. Guess what happens, bro? They just do surgery. They cut that ball sack open and they suture together the labia, right? And hopefully that person lives a relatively normal life. Does this person likely have some sort of androgen insensitivity syndrome that caused that intersex condition to occur? Yes. Yes. The answer is yes to that. So that's why I'm saying regarding in sex of where it is typically assigned at birth and it's usually male or female, but it's not as simple as you would initially assume, right?
Even if I grant you that in these intersex or in these rare circumstances, I can agree with the word assign for the sake of argument for those. You wouldn't say though that a doctor is assigning male to a perfectly healthy boy with a penis. That's not assigned. That just
no. You are assigning.
They are male.
You're looking at them. They have a penis. You go, that's a boy. You assigned it boy. That's how that works. Okay. So here's the thing. So sex is the biology. Sex is the biology, which is typically
not male.
Hold on. I just want to. Sex is the biology that's typically assigned at birth. Okay. And then the next regarding gender, which you already agreed, where you're talking about roles, behaviors, identities, and expectations that stem from someone's sex.
Yeah.
No. You did agree. You said, I agree with that. You said yourself, I agree with that. So let's understand that the difference between gender and sex are different things. So when I am referring to a trans woman, I am not saying that the trans woman's sex is now woman. I'm saying that the trans woman's gender, which is across from, which is the Latin terminology phrasing for trans, across from, is different from their sex. Their gender is different from their sex. Trans. Do you understand?
We got to get something clear though. I did not agree with you. I said that would be your definition of gender. I would agree that that's your definition of gender. I never agreed gender was different from sex though. I agreed that there are roles that men and women have in society, but that's because
gender.
Of their sex, not separate from it.
Okay,
that's
but there can be
sex, not separate.
No, it is separate. It can absolutely. So when I say America's Almanac, you're behaving like a woman. That can be a logic. I'm not insulting you, by the way. I apologize. I'm not actually meaning that. Good. I'm saying if you're behaving like I don't know, maybe I watched you like picking at your nail or something, and then I'm just like, you're behaving like a woman, right? And you showed up. Right. But there are people where they have enough of those traits and they actually feel like a woman, right? And so it's like, what is that? What do we call that? How do we address that kind of situation? The answer is very simple. The answer is that they are across from their sex, as in transgender. That's what that is.
Yeah, but hang on. You just contradicted now your earlier position because an individual does not have to exhibit any of like if they're a man, right? They don't have to exhibit any traits, any womanly traits in order to be considered trans. It's all self-ID only. So it's not a matter of if they have enough of these traits, then they're trans.
Yes,
it's
because
only self-ID.
The journey of someone's sexual identity, their gender identity is complex. It's not as a simple black and white. And because of that, I have to leave it open for the person's personal phenomenology. Sure.
It still, even with that definition though, you have explained that there's a variance to humans. We're all different. Yes, that's true. You haven't actually explained why gender would be different from sex in any tangible way.
Because a person's behaviors, identities, and expectations in society may be different than what is typical. That would mean that they are that their gender is across that whatever that behavior, identity, expectations in society are different from what is typical. That would be across from your sex, as in transgender. But
wouldn't you say though that it still would be tied to their biology. So, like, for example,
Yeah,
we
it
were
can
earlier talking about men
absolutely
being
be.
stronger.
It is possible,
Men,
but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's social.
yeah, but hang on. I'll give you an example. Do you agree that, generally speaking, men have a duty to protect women and children?
It depends.
On what?
Your capability.
So we would still, I think, generally hold a man.
Like, have you ever met Quinny?
Quinny? Who's that?
Yeah, it's a person on this server. I would not count on them to protect. Like, I guarantee you, Irma, who's a woman on this server, Irma, would be far better at protecting people than Quinny, who is a male.
Yeah, but do you think it's so let me ask you this. Do you think it's a coincidence that have you ever seen like super jacked women like that go to the gym and they're like, 170 pounds of just pure muscle, they're fucking huge. Have you noticed that they are almost always dating a guy who is also like a total gym rat and like way bigger than her?
Not
Do you
always.
ever see those women with like totally scrawny dudes who can't stand up for themselves?
Some of them.
Wouldn't you say generally, or maybe you haven't seen enough of them to make that? I would say that generally.
But why does that matter to me?
Even
I guess like you're just talking about someone's
because of what you just said.
Sexual preferences.
Because of what you just said, which is that I would say that it would be embedded in women's nature to still, even
Except
when they can defend themselves, to look for men who can.
Except where it's not. America?
In what situations is it not? What do you mean?
An individual where your generalization doesn't fit.
Yeah, but I'm talking generally. That's not going to apply to every human.
Okay, so you're saying that
generally.
it's not within their nature except for individuals where it's not.
Yeah, but just because people can differ or be different, that doesn't mean that the rule, the exception does not disprove the rule.
Well,
right?
It kind of does, because you're just applying the generalization. Okay, how about this? No, actually, this is great. This is the problem. This is the experiment that I like to apply to people when they try to apply too much generalization in their life. So let's try it this way. You think there's a group of people that, say, commit the most rape?
Like, are you asking genders,
like the most rape, the
sex,
most crime, the most violent crime? Is there a group of people that do that?
In America, in the world? What are you talking about?
In America.
Yeah, men commit most violent crime. If that's what you're asking. I don't know.
So generally speaking, the people that commit the most crime are men.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, shouldn't we like preemptively like imprison all those people?
Didn't you, bro? You just disproved yourself, not me.
Huh? How so?
You just disproved yourself, not me, because I was the one saying that the exception doesn't prove the rule. So I would say
I was bringing up how exceptions absolutely disprove the rule. Right? I'm pointing out the absurdity in your position, right? Because I can bring up how men tend to cause most of the crime and they cause most of the... So if I applied your logic, I could, for example, say, okay, well, we need to segregate all men from society because they have the highest propensity of these things, because I can only think in generalities as opposed to looking at things from an individual nature. I'm arguing about things in an individual nature. I want to say, okay, well, it's not one size fits all. Every person can be quite different from one another, and it's perfectly okay if you're not abiding by these like stereotypical norms. That's what I meant.
You're saying that if you could find one, from our previous example, if you can find one woman who dates a man who can't protect her, who's scrawnier than her, then that means that it's not anymore generally true that women want men who are stronger.
I never said it's not generally true. It is generally true, but that doesn't mean therefore that everybody is like that. That's stupid.
I accepted that not everyone's like that.
Okay.
All I said was that it wouldn't
So
disprove
beyond that
it's
point,
still generally true.
So beyond that point, can someone's behavior be different from what is typical at their sex?
Yes, of course.
Okay. What about their identity?
They can identify as whatever the fuck they want.
Correct.
Doesn't mean it's true.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Doesn't
I love
mean
it.
it's true.
Okay, so their behavior, their identity can be different from their sex. What about their role? What about their gender role? Their just their role in society. Can it be different than what's typical of their sex?
It can be, but it shouldn't be. So I would.
Okay, no. But it can be, can it? It can.
It can, but it should be changed.
Okay, all right, cool.
So like
great,
men should protect.
So
men should protect.
So
and
all
provide,
of these
and if they're not, they
norms,
should be.
right? All of these things, the behavior, the identity, the role, if that can be different from your sex, what do you call this collection of things?
It from your worldview, that is what you call gender.
Okay, what do you call it?
Is that it would just be a variance in human personality.
That
Everyone's
seems
different.
like a lot of words to describe one word. What would you call it?
Yeah. The reason I have to distinguish it is because
you don't like this thing. You don't like it, and it makes you uncomfortable, and that's why you're lying.
No, you're the one lying because I'm telling you.
So I'm going again. Right?
No,
you're able to establish a difference in the terms of these behaviors, and this is what I refer to as gender. You should be able to operate within this paradigm. This is not difficult.
No, this is fallacious, bro. You're saying that because you're making a category error. I'm not agreeing with you that is gender, even if it can be distinguished in some category.
I'm calling it gender. Okay, so when I refer to someone being, well, doesn't matter. When I refer to somebody as being transgender, what I'm referring to is that their gender is different from their sex based on the definition that I agree with here. Okay, you can disagree with it all you want, but my argument is completely logical here when I'm saying it. And
no, that's actually not
not true. No, it's actually a variance of like what things are like related as to what their sex is. Like what is this argument?
You're contradicting yourself again.
No,
because you don't actually believe that because it still all reduces to self-ID. So even if their roles match up perfectly. On paper, they look cis, right? They look totally like there's no deviation whatsoever. If they ID, though, it doesn't matter. Now they're trans from your worldview. So it actually has nothing to do with that collection of traits that we were talking about, that we just spent 20 minutes talking about.
Well, no, it does.
Only reduces to self-ID.
It does.
How? If it reduces to self-ID every time?
What? No, again, it comes down to a series of roles, behaviors, identities. And I'm just talking about what someone refers to as transgender, okay, as in across from gender, or rather across from what their sex is. That's effectively what that word means. And so I'm looking at it as roles, identities, expectations in society.
Yeah, but look,
right?
Listen.
We can look at the social and cultural construct, which are influenced by norms, traditions, which you yourself also agreed with. This is what I'm referring to as gender being different, right? I'm never, ever implying that their sex is different. It's not. It's the same. It remains the same, and it will remain the same the rest of their life. It will never change, nor does any trans person who knows anything about anything would even argue against what I'm saying right now.
Yeah, but listen, hang on. That you're arguing against something I didn't say. My point here is actually that none of that even matters to your world. This is an internal critique of you. That none of this matters to your worldview because it will always reduce to self-ID only. So even if I grant all of this, that yes, that's gender, it's different from sex. Even if I grant all of that, it doesn't even matter to your position, because if someone exhibited none of the trans traits that you're saying that would be opposite from their sex, if somebody exhibited none of those, it wouldn't matter. As long as they self-ID, then you would still say that they are trans.
I'm not sure.
None of that matters.
I'll be honest with you, I've never seen a single trans person that does absolutely nothing
that's fallacious.
to address their roles, behaviors, identity. Like you're literally telling me like
that's an argument
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson comes up to me and just says, "I'm trans now," and then I'd be like, "Okay, well, what do what does that what does
If
that
he
mean?
did,
And then does absolutely nothing for like a full year and just says that they're trans.
You wouldn't affirm him, you bigot, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, right? It's you that's being the bigot, right?
Well, this is a valid critique. Wouldn't you affirm him? He wouldn't have to change anything about himself, right? You would affirm him.
I mean, when it comes to trans people and the journey that goes on in becoming trans, it's often a very long, very arduous journey. And mine is from an era. Mine is from, yeah. I mean, if there were less people like you, I agree. It'd be a lot easier. It'd be a lot easier. Bro. No, that is an argument. Sure.
No, but the point is, none of that actually matters. All of the roles, duties, expectations that we just spent 30 minutes talking about, none of it matters if it's all self-ID anyway. It
is a long series of steps. Okay.
So what series of steps are enough for you to affirm someone?
Dude, as soon as they say that they're trans, they're being genuine about it. Absolutely, they're trans.
So it's not about the journey. It's just about self-ID.
It is about the journey.
No, it's not. You just said it's not. As soon as someone says it, you don't know what went into that. They could.
Gotcha.
They
Do you
could
got anything else for me, man? This
is
you're boring me.
You just. I mean, you don't have a refutation to this point.
I do. I did
Go
multiple
ahead.
times. You've repeated it several times.
It's self-ID only. Why can't you just admit that? It's self-ID only.
Because there's more to it. It's not just self-ID.
There isn't, though. You just said that if someone came up to you with no journey,
I said it can be.
Right. So if it can be, then there is actually no journey component to this. It's self-ID only. And so none of the biological factors matter.
It can be self-ID, but there's instances where it's not self-ID.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Okay.
So it's not that it's only self-ID. It can be a bit of both.
But you give the benefit of the doubt to the self-ID every time, right?
Sure. Generally.
So isn't that just a fancy way of saying it's only self-ID?
No.
Because all of the extra work that goes in, if 100% of people who call themselves trans in this situation never actually did any of the journey you're talking about, you would still affirm all 100% of them.
Yeah, I affirm people in their gender.
So then it's not about the journey. It's self-ID only. That's the whole point.
Not all sandwiches have to have meat on them.
I still don't understand that analogy. But look, I know there's people waiting, and I've been with you a while. So I just hope you understand this. So, I try to keep it respectful.
Hopefully you...
And I appreciate a good debate, but...
Gotcha. Hopefully you understand the difference between sex and gender and realize that trans people aren't changing their sex.
I never said they were, but that's fine. That's a straw man. So.
Yep.
All right. Well, I guess I'll hop off now. So.
Have a good day.
Appreciate the convo, man. You too.
Magnus Graf, you're being invited to speak. How are you doing today?
Hi guys, I'm doing good. Thank you very much for giving me the platform to speak.
Yeah, what do you got for me?
So I would actually like to talk about your hot takes on number 10, trans children, diverse gender affirming therapy.
Deserve gender affirming therapy. Yes.
Yes. So within that, within what context are you taking that? Are you taking that from them getting that from a therapist? Or do you believe all children that feel that they are not comfortable with their assigned sex should actually get gender-affirming therapy?
Well, gender-affirming therapy, or gender-affirming care, rather, is the therapy part that you're talking about is included along with hormone blockers. So to point out like exactly how it works is typically what happens is. If you have a child who could be gender dysphoric, you go to a psychologist. The psychologist will then talk with the child to determine whether or not that they have gender dysphoria. A majority of the cases actually stop right here. This is roughly 90% of the kids. end up actually not being gender dysphoric, but rather just simply feel like that they are trans, right? Nothing more. In situations like that, because suicidal ideation can be quite high, what they actually just do is just social affirmation, right? Where basically they can socially transition, but they are not given hormone blockers. They're not given, any drugs or of any kind, right? They can wear dresses, they can put on makeup, and then they're fine, right? They usually, and a majority of the time they actually grow out of it, right? For this, but for the final 10% of individuals that are remaining going to the psychologist, they find out they do have gender dysphoria. And if they do have gender dysphoria, typically what they do is that they assign, in the United States, they assign hormone blockers. And if you have the hormone blockers, what happens is that it mitigates a person from experiencing puberty, effectively establishing an androgynous body. So in that type of situation, they basically will be taking hormone blockers until they are 18, as in a fully grown adult at this point, to be able to make decisions on behalf of their body as to whether or not they want to fully transition. And there's actually a reasoning behind this, specifically regarding if somebody, say, for example, goes through puberty, right, and assuming that they don't go through their suicidal ideation, that they make it all the way to 18, well, they've actually just transformed their entire body into the gender that they don't want it to be, which means that there's likely involved very invasive surgery in the future, both in facial reconstruction as well as potentially mastectomies and other surgeries that are quite invasive. This is not a problem if they were able to take hormone blockers and then HRT at the point of 18. And that's what I'm referring to, is that currently on the books, there's several states that ban this practice, even though that it is currently by multiple different medical standards that this is the medically efficacious method. Right, the only people that are talking about it in opposition are politicians that know nothing regarding the science or the endocrinology or the psychology or the biology or any of it. So that's why I say that children deserve gender affirming therapy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So my argument the argument I'm going to make is that psychologists have been able to determine that up until the frontal cortex hasn't developed, a child shouldn't be actually making life-changing or life-altering decisions of that magnitude. Mm-hmm. And I'm currently helping out on a mental health server, and one of the individuals that we do have on there is a 27-year-old male that transitioned to a female, so they're an MTF, and they are currently about 7 years into their transition, and with all the affirming that has taken place and all the affirmation that they receive from family, friends, and everything, they still do not feel comfortable with their new gender. Okay. So within that, I believe that when it comes to children, I don't believe that children should have that decision at the end of the day. They should not be able to make that decision. I understand that, when your hormones have already developed and you've had it for so many years, especially if a boy wants to be a girl, they would have actually grown hair, and the testosterone would have caused them to become more masculine. However, you would actually have a more dysfunctional individual at the end of the day that has gone through numerous chemical, psychological treatment that is completely unstable at a later age. So from my perspective, I don't believe children should be receiving gender affirming therapy until they've actually developed closer to the age of 23, 24, 25 and actually started dealing with actual life decisions.
Okay. So what would you suggest then if somebody had gender dysphoria?
Well, it's difficult. Well, if you've identified gender dysphoria, I would actually say that the best practice is to actually have the child grow up with their assigned gender or their assigned sex until that age. I mean, I've on the mental health server. I'm not a transfer by any means. I used to be, because I didn't understand the concept myself.
Are you a mental health professional yourself?
No. Okay. We're just helping out. We just support.
Why do you think that, for example, the American Psychological Association would tell you the what ought happen if somebody has gender dysphoria? Like, why do you think that they would agree with me as opposed to like don't affirm them?
Well, it's the simple fact that if we can agree that gender is an idea.
That's not my question.
If I decide, no, I understand, but I'm going to get to the point of I'm going to give you an answer to your question. If we agree that gender is an idea, so let's say, for instance, I decide I want to be a female, and I then take, for instance, hormones, and I go through the affirmation process. So I'm getting the treatment to affirm, and then 5 years later I decide I want to be a male again. That is something I have to live with. That for me is something I have to deal with. And it's been proven that a lot of psychologists have been pushing children into the narrative of going forward and heading and going onto. They've actually misdiagnosed more children with gender dysphoria than they've actually helped children. There are numerous cases within the states that this is proven, and I'm not sure if you are familiar with Jordan Peterson, and if you actually watch, if you also
I'm familiar with Jordan Peterson. I've even read his book.
Yes. So from when I started helping out on the mental health server, I started looking into his books and also what he was stating, and that is why my personal belief is that the decision that a trans child makes, if I as a medical professional misdiagnose or malevolently identify or diagnose a child with gender dysphoria, I would be destroying that child's life. That is a life-altering decision. That's a life-altering process that they cannot turn away from, and that's exactly why I do not agree with that part of the system.
Okay, so I guess like my concern that I'm having is that we should make sure that we're applying what is the most medically efficacious method. And I agree with you, there can be instances of over diagnosing, but I guess that doesn't really remove my question. You're not really answering my question. My question is, why do you think that things like the American Psychiatry Association would agree with me regarding the treatment of gender dysphoria as opposed to denial of affirmation?
Well, I believe they would probably agree with you because it is a form of treatment.
You're arguing a form of treatment, right? Which is to deny their delusion. Would you call it a delusion? Sorry, I don't mean to put words in your mouth.
No, I wouldn't call it a delusion. I would say that it's most probably a confusion at that stage.
Okay, so
the reason why
that reaffirming them of their confusion, specifically denying their confusion, is better than just affirming their gender. So I guess then my question to you is why do you think that the APA would disagree with you?
Well, I personally believe that most medical practices will most probably have you fall into that system so that you can actually they would actually financially benefit from you. The reason why I state this is because...
Do you remember the part where I talked about medically invasive surgery?
Yes, and I heard that, yes.
So the medical establishment actually has an incentive to ensure that they don't take hormone blockers, right? Because they would actually make more money in the future.
Yes, that would be from the medical system itself. But however, medical professionals
So why is it that they
themselves would be
don't do
making
that
more.
as opposed to just giving hormone blockers when needed?
Well, that I can't answer. But from my from what I could see,
Well, I'll give you the answer.
Helping.
Anytime that I find that there is an expert that disagrees with me, and I find that the general consensus is that, it makes me go, okay, well, obviously I'm not a doctorate in that field. So then my logical conclusion is that, okay, these people likely know something that I don't. And so then I pause, I read the literature, right, that allows me to and when I say the literature, I'm referring to what these people would actually study, and then I can come to the conclusion from there, right? And I think that's a very logical way to go about it, because you have to ask yourself, these people, they've been, studying this particular subject for their whole life. They have a different opinion from myself. So obviously there's got to be something there, right? Because they thought of it longer than me watching Jordan Peterson in YouTube videos, right?
Of course, no, I would agree with that. However, what I can say from dealing with individuals that are experiencing a confusion, and the fact, because at the end of the day, if we are allowed to give a child the choice to go ahead,
it's not giving the child the choice.
However, it becomes a choice. There's a lot of parents.
It is at discretion of the parent, the child, and the psychologist. The psychologist, if they genuinely have gender dysphoria, absolutely do recommend hormone blockers, because they understand that the mortality rate of somebody who is genuinely gender dysphoric, that then goes through puberty, they experience their body physically changing into something that they do not want it to be. It increases suicidal ideation by a huge margin. And so we can easily come to the conclusion that we don't want our kids to die. And so it helps to, the one thing that it has been seen to actually reduce this suicidal ideation is gender affirmation, right? So the denial, it's actually, and it is also true that the denial or your method does not decrease suicidal ideation, but increases suicidal ideation. So that's what is currently found in the literature. So I guess what we would have to acknowledge is that, okay, the studies are real, they are empirically verified, and then from there we just have to change our opinion. But I guess I'm curious as to what you have to say about that.
Yeah. So for me, the way I look at it is, I've dealt with plenty of medical staff, not concerning, not directly dealing with gender reassigning, reaffirming surgeries, and that. But from a medical perspective, I've come to distrust medical professionals in the last 10 years of my life, due to the loss of family members and so forth, due to being misdiagnosed. My father passed away due to medical incompetence. So not my question, but my issue is the professional that's doing the diagnosing. If they are financially motivated, how do you prevent them from destroying that child's life?
You can't use that, because I've already explained to you that it actually is an incentive for them to not be on hormone blockers, because it actually will cost, if they are genuinely gender dysphoric, it would actually make more money for the medical establishment to involve them in invasive surgeries. You can't use that argument.
Well, I believe you can, because at the end of the day, it becomes motivated by the individuals.
Well, then it's not the medical establishment. That's a motivation of the individual.
So, for instance, the practicing professional.
Okay, how about this? I mean, you gave me. I'm not invalidating your personal anecdote, but I just want to give you an example of kind of the exact opposite experience, right? I suppose from what you've probably experienced from the medical community. So I had a friend who they had clinical depression, and when I was young, very young, I was assigned Ritalin as a kid. Right? Do they even assign Ritalin anymore to like in 2024? Like, anyway,
in South Africa they do, yes.
They gave me Ritalin, because I was too hyper. So they
yeah. My brother was the same.
And so after a while, like my parents, it was like obvious that the Ritalin wasn't good for me, right? That it's probably better that I do without, because I basically turned into like this zombie.
A zombie.
Yeah, that could barely like function. Like it was bad. I mean, like it was so weird. Like the experience that like I could stare at like a thing on the wall for like a really extended period of time and really just like analyze that thing on the wall and like why it's there and what it's composed of. And it was so weird. Like there's no way this is how normal people thought. Like I was thinking in my own brain. But when I got older, it was like, okay, well, just do without, just deal with the fact that, you can have some attention deficit disorder issues and, just live with it. And that's exactly what I did. I lived with it. And, honestly, it didn't do bad at all. I did okay. I got good grades when I got into college because I realized that it was going after my pocketbook. And so my experience was that, the medical system, it overdiagnosis, so I could sell you drugs. That it was the exact same thing that you've experienced. In come my friend who had clinical depression, and he was taking antidepressant, and he was saying how, how wonky his antidepressants are. And based on my own experience, I was like, why do you even need this stuff? What is the point? Like, do you honestly think that you can't like do it on your own? And they believed me. They said, you're probably right. I probably could do it on my own. You know what happened? 2 weeks later, we catch my friend with a kitchen knife outside, and he tried to gut himself. Right? We caught him just in time. So he prevented him killing himself. And so it was at that point I realized that I almost killed my friend because of my own hubris, because of my own stupidity. When I realized that was even a thing, I said, okay, at this point, I don't think I'm ever going to trust myself when it comes to any medical diagnosis whatsoever, because I, at the end of the day, am not a doctor. Okay? And I can't imagine having to be so confident with a child who has gender dysphoria and say that I'm going to do the thing that is the exact opposite of what is recommended by doctors. Do you see my concern?
Oh yeah, I understand that 100%. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody wants to be ignorant about another individual's study and also their expertise in a field. My problem, that's why I'm stating that my brother also was also on Ritalin for about 4 years. He was like a zombie. He was there but not there, if I could say that. My brother was always the type of person that would run around. He would punch you in the shoulder and run away and laugh. The moment he started taking Ritalin, he was literally like a zombie, like you stated. He would just sit on a couch and watch TV like a potato. You would call him out, and he would slowly react. He was so completely out of it. My mother actually stopped and took him off of it. And I agree with you. What my issue is, what I found, and I'm not talking about years ago. I believe there are good practicing professionals, but they are far and few between. What I've come to find is that there are a lot of professionals that are only in it for the financial gain. They do not care whether the treatment that they provide or the diagnosis that they've done is actually correct.
I am not equipped to assume that. And
so,
do you think, hold on, based on the story that I've told you, do you believe that you're equipped to know that?
No, I don't believe I'm equipped to know it. However, what I do is before I actually go ahead and do anything myself, I would actually go and just read, not just read up like on YouTube, but actually go and look into the medical diagnosis of certain things, so that I myself am also, how can I say, educated on the subject itself, to be able to determine if the professional has my best interest at heart. Because what I have found personally is that not all medical professionals do really care about you.
I completely agree.
My argument,
like Jordan Peterson, for example.
Well, no, I kind of agree with a lot of things that he states, and some of them.
Listen, I loved Jordan Peterson when he first came out. That dude, right there. There are numerous issues that I have with the guy that made me become a lot more skeptical of him. I don't know if you want me to go over it.
Oh no, it's I mean, if you want to, we can. I just wanted to prove. I just wanted to make my argument is on that. If the parents themselves are not educated on the subject itself, they would not be able to determine if that professional has their child's best interest at heart. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Well, I believe that the psychologist absolutely has the child's interest at heart. Right. That's what they're in the profession for.
Well, that's what one would assume. However, like I said, I've dealt with many professionals in my life, and I've come to the conclusion that that's not the case. So, from my own perspective, my own opinion, I believe that as a parent, and I believe the parents themselves need to also be educated on the subject itself, and not just take the professional's word as the truth, if that makes sense. So, my personal opinion on that is, I believe that trans children deserve the gender-affirming therapy if the parents are actually also educated on the matter, and not just take the professional's word as the truth. Because there have been many cases that have proven that when these children have gone through these therapies, they have massive amounts of regrets when they a couple of years later. Very
tiny percentage, by the way.
Yes, but however, you still have it.
I believe it's so 90. There's a 2% regret rate. Right, I've looked up these studies, and you yourself can also find them on Google. The regret rate of gender affirming care. It's very, very low. It's one of the lowest available. So, I mean...
Okay, so when you looked at those statistics, are they on the increase or the decline?
I don't know if they're on an increase or decline, but when it was analyzed, it's very low. The regret rate is very low. Right? Because the reality is, I need you to understand that the reality of the argument, or the reality of the medical establishment regarding trans care, believe it or not, is actually quite conservative in its positioning, right? They don't just give hormone blockers willy-nilly. They don't just do that. They don't just give hormone replacement therapy until you're 18. They have breast reduction surgery, which is available for cisgendered people. And so as a result, it is extended out to trans people. But again, that's the only instance where surgery is even recommended to minors. And on top of that, you basically, the general medical consensus is that you have to be taken to a psychologist to determine if you even have gender dysphoria. And if you don't have gender dysphoria, they don't even bother with hormone blockers because there's no need, right? It is already conservative in its positioning.
Yes, and that's what I understand. So from my understanding, that's how I see it. So the process has been set
that's why
up
I'm
in
saying
such a
children
manner.
deserve gender affirming care, right? Because right now there are policies on the books that are specifically banning this, even though that there is no medical efficacy to that whatever.
All right, that makes sense. I can agree with that.
Oh, I like that. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I really
appreciate your
appreciate it.
time.
That was a good conversation.